If NFL teams are now telling us that you shouldn't pay running backs, instead just sign great offensive line pieces, go get your elite level quarterback, shouldn't we just be drafting the running backs behind great offensive lines? Now, I'd be lying if I claimed I was an offensive line expert. Sadly, I'm not. But I do have access to the internet and I have a Microsoft Excel sheet. So what I did here is I went through and I found every site that I could that put out 2023 offensive line rankings, and I created a sort of an ADP list. I tracked the rankings from Fantasy Pros, Sharp Football, PFF, lineups, as well as Pro Football Network. And then I averaged those 5 rankings to get a concrete set of expectations for offensive lines going into this next year. So we're going to go through the top 10 according to experts. And starting at 10, you are going to have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, with the Bengals, I will say that they were top 10 last year, and they ended up giving you a ton of production, not only at wide receiver that everybody knew was going to happen, but also at the running back position. I understand that a lot of people, especially at the end of the year, focused in on the split that was there between Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon. If y'all remember, Perine did have a pretty large role, but it honestly just distracted from a phenomenal season that Joe Mixon had. Joe Mixon went out there and was the running back 6 from a points per game perspective. He had 5.4 targets per game. Joe Mixon had the highest target share we have ever seen in his NFL career. It was almost up at 15%. So what's incredible is he finishes as that mid running back 1 based off his usage, his volume, and not necessarily just crazy touchdown efficiency. We saw back in 2021, Joe Mixon actually averaged a touchdown a game. There's no reason to believe that in an elite Cincinnati Bengals offense, he can't get back to scoring a touchdown in almost every single game, or maybe averaging more than a touchdown a game. So if you look at the underlying numbers for Mixon, they're already very exciting. And y'all know what we did is we did the historical research looking at these older running backs since the year 2000, plugged in their most recent season at their given age, and looked for comps that we had since the year 2000 of what we can expect that next season. And if you're looking at someone that was in that same draft class, maybe an Austin Eckler, someone that was directly before, such as Derrick Henry, those guys are pretty damn old. Those guys, showed that historically you're expecting some type of regression or fall off at their given age. Well, Mixon was actually the youngest running back in that 2017 NFL draft. So if we're going to be looking at this from a Joe Mixon perspective, you actually had not too much in terms of the fall off with these backs. The following season, for everybody who comped to Joe Mixon, you had, honestly, fine production across the board. This included, 2012, Chris Johnson, 2019, Melvin Gordon, 2022, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, 2005, Thomas Jones, 2016, Mark Ingram. Really the only guy that fell off at this age that comped similar was actually Noshawn Moreno back in 2014. So yeah, I think Mixon is honestly pretty safe bet this next season. And if you're looking at where he's getting drafted, right now, Joe Mixon in ESPN normal redraft formats is the 27th player off the board. And there, it's a little bit expensive, right? Nonetheless, I think you're fine drafting him based off the elite level offense and the great offensive line at that price point. Now, if you're going to go over to Underdog drafts currently, Joe Mixon is actually a much better price over there, where you're looking at Joe Mixon as the running back 15. You're looking at him as an ADP of 46, so sometimes getting him in round 5. And what's crazy is if you're going over to the player props right now on Underdog, y'all know I am trying to stay away from all more thans on these player props going into the year because so much craziness can happen, but they only have Joe Mixon at 800 rushing yards. So if I ever was going to look to take a more than on a line, probably would be Mixon at 800 rushing yards. But going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Javonte Williams. With Williams, even if he has a great offensive line, I think that everything comes down to the format that you're playing in on if you should be drafting him or not. Personally, when I am drafting in underdog tournaments where they are small dollar buy-ins in massive prize pools, such as the puppy draft they have live right now, which is the $5 buy-in, $500,000 prize pool, $75,000 for first place, I'm drafting the hell out of Javonte Williams, specifically for the elite level ceiling in weeks 15, 16, 17, even if you start slow at the beginning of the year, or even if he starts off injured at the beginning of the season. But if I was playing in a normal redraft format where you are not able to put injured players on the IR, there I would be looking to avoid Javonte Williams in drafts, just given the fact that at the end of the day, he would be burning a roster spot, limiting the actual waiver wire moves that you can make at the beginning part of the season. So please understand your league settings on if you should be going through and targeting a player like Javonte Williams or not. Now, our next guy, we're going to be looking at the Green Bay Packers at 8. And obviously, we have to talk Aaron Jones here. Aaron Jones is a running back that was in that same draft class as Joe Mixon, but Aaron Jones stayed all 4 years at UTEP, so it's not like he comps the same in terms of the age that you had with Joe Mixon getting drafted at 20 years old. So if you look at the historical comps on what we had the following season from an Aaron Jones perspective, you have a decent amount of players falling off. I mean, Jamal Charles got injured the next season. I mean, Jamal Anderson got injured the next season. The guys that were able to stay healthy include Steven Jackson from 2011 to 2012. I mean, he fell from 15 points per game down to 12.5. You had Larry Johnson falling 5 points per game. You had Fred Jackson falling 2 points per game. You had Chester Taylor falling 3 points per game. You had Joyke Bell falling 5 points per game. You had Chris Johnson falling 8 points per game. You had Darren McFadden falling 8 points per game, and Raheem Mostert falling 10 points per game. So what I'm worried about here, if you're looking at Aaron Jones, is historically these guys that comp to him are beginning to see that pretty large fall off at the age Aaron Jones currently sits at. Now, what I'm possibly going to be doing instead is I may actually be pivoting over to AJ Dillon. And I think that Dillon is the perfect kind of pick for a best ball format in particular, because it's going to be very difficult to know when AJ Dillon is startable in games where Aaron Jones plays, right? Because clearly Aaron Jones is still the starting running back in this backfield. That's why he's the running back 17 in underdog drafts going in round 5, whereas AJ Dillon is the running back 34 going at pick 102. But AJ Dillon should still have a role on a week-to-week basis, even with Aaron Jones in this offense. And if Aaron Jones were to go down, I think AJ Dillon, based off the offensive line play of the Green Bay Packers, could be a top 10 running back in this offense. Plus, I mean, like I said, I do think that you get some random usable weeks, even with the healthy Aaron Jones. Now, super happy to see our next team, the Atlanta Falcons, coming in here at 7. Y'all know I'm rooting for our guy, Bijan Robinson. Hook 'em horns. With Bijan, he is the best running back prospect we've seen since Saquon Barkley in 2018. Hell, since the year 2014. The only guys that have looked as good as Bijan Robinson as prospects have been Leonard Fournette, Saquon Barkley, both top 5 picks. We've seen rookie running backs outside of Mr. Clyde Edwards-Helaire actually give you elite seasons in the past, with Saquon Barkley being the running back 2 overall in 2018. Leonard Fournette, the running back 7 overall in 2017. Ezekiel Elliott, the running back 3 overall in 2016. And Adrian Peterson being the running back 5 overall in his rookie season. Y'all know I love Bijan Robinson. Y'all know at the same time that I am very, very biased in his favor. But hell, if you're looking at his ADP right now, he's the running back 3 in underdog drafts with an ADP of 10. If you're going over to ESPN leagues, there he is the running back 3 as well with an ADP of 10 as well. And if you're looking at his projections for year 1 with the player props on Underdog, they have Bijan Robinson at 8.5 rushing touchdowns and about 1,100 rushing yards. But keep in mind, the most exciting thing about Bijan Robinson is not only the Atlanta Falcons wanting to lead the NFL in rush attempts, but also the fact that he is a real pass catcher out of this backfield. Not just someone that's going to see dump offs, but someone that runs real routes indicated by the man going out there and averaging 16.5 yards per reception this past season. But of course, if y'all want to check out any of those player props, if you want to get into one of those drafts in which we are doing every single day on the live stream, you can find that link to Underdog Fantasy in the comment section in the description of this video. They're best ball drafts, so no time commitment at all during the year. That's how I drafted 700 teams, and how I won $150,000 last season. And if you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you'll get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flogfantasy.com, and it's available in damn near every state. You can see the states here, also available everywhere in Canada but Ontario. Now, the next team is going to be the Dallas Cowboys, sitting here at 6. With Dallas, I mean, Pollard's expectations are sky high this year for a reason, right? I mean, if you're looking at Tony Pollard, at least with his player props, he's sitting there over 1,000 rushing yards. And we know that Tony Pollard historically has been a running back that you're more excited about as a pass catcher than just a rusher himself. If we're looking at where he's going in ESPN drafts, there he's going as a pick 23. And if you're looking at him in running back rankings, he is going to be the running back 9. Whereas if you're looking at underdog drafts, Tony Pollard is actually the running back 6 with an ADP of 20. So I haven't drafted a lot of Pollard, if I'm going to be honest with you, for a couple different reasons. One, I think that getting Derrick Henry at a much cheaper cost on underdog is appealing to me in a half PPR format. 2, because now Saquon Barkley is going behind him. I'd probably rather have Saquon Barkley, but of course, that's for those underdog drafts. If you're playing in your normal redraft league and Pollard's going after Jacobs, after Barkley, well after Derrick Henry, I think Pollard's a fine selection at that point. I'm a little bit worried about them bringing in either Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, Ezekiel Elliott's. If they don't, if we get to September and Tony Pollard's still really the only running back on the step chart, I will be moving Pollard up our rankings. Now, going over to our next team, we're going to have the Kansas City Chiefs at 5, which should make you excited about Mahomes, which should make you excited, obviously, about the backs in this backfield. Isaiah Pacheco currently injured, but honestly, his price point, in my mind, is way more appealing than I initially thought it was going to be. Now, if you're looking at Isaiah Pacheco right now in underdog drafts, this is a running back that is going as the running back 27. He has an ADP of 86. Now, in your normal redraft leagues, there, Isaiah Pacheco is running back 23. I mean, he's going directly ahead of J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers. So I probably can't draft him in the normal redraft format, but if you're getting him in underdog drafts right now, I mean, at an extreme discount. I mean, he is cheap as hell. He's currently going after Brandon Cooks. I kind of like the shot. I still think the Chiefs could bring in one of those veterans, someone like Zeke, Dalvin, or Fournette, but nonetheless, I mean, at the end of the day, he's the starting running back behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Now, our next team will be the Baltimore Ravens at 4. I mean, with Baltimore, you kind of have to assume that they're going to go and skew a little bit more towards the pass this year with the change at offensive coordinator. But I still think on the whole, this is going to be a team that looks to run the ball a ton. Now, they're probably not going to lead the NFL in rushing as they have pretty much for the past 4 seasons. But nonetheless, with J.K. Dobbins as a running back that now is fully healthy, or presumably fully healthy. We're going to have to monitor what's going on in training camp right now. Coming back off him destroying his knee before the 2022 NFL season. I think it really does depend on where you're going to draft him right now. If you're seeing him in normal redraft formats, he is the running back 24. If you're seeing him in those underdog drafts, however, you're actually getting him all the way up at running back 18. So yeah, I mean, I would probably look to grab him where you can in your normal redraft formats, just given the fact that it seems like a lot of people don't understand the real upside of this Baltimore Ravens offense. Now, our next running back is going to be one of these safer options you could find. Nick Chubb with the Cleveland Browns. Not only do you have the departure of Kareem Hunt leading to a more expanded role as a pass catcher, not only do you have Nick Chubb for 3 straight seasons now, averaging at least 100 yards per game, but you also have an elite offensive line. Now, I think everybody really understands why Nick Chubb is going so high in fantasy drafts. I don't really think we need to discuss that. Maybe what we want to look at is just the improved play of Deshaun Watson this next season. I mean, if you're looking at the cost of Deshaun Watson right now, this is a quarterback that we have to remember before everything happened, before the suspension, before he left Houston. If you were looking at a points per game perspective, there had only been one other quarterback since the year 2014 to have the same floor and ceiling combination as Deshaun Watson in fantasy football in particular. That one other quarterback with that same floor and ceiling combination was Patrick Mahomes. Now, of course, Watson wasn't great this past season. I thought he was going to come back. I thought he was immediately going to be elite, and I was clearly wrong about that. But we may be able to assume that with an entire offseason under his belt, combined with the fact that they have a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, this can be an offense that I think sees that next step forward with improved Deshaun Watson play. If he can get back to what he was in Houston, and this offensive line should help a ton, I think Watson could be a top 3 quarterback in fantasy. Now, our next team, the Detroit Lions, is a very interesting spot. Obviously, the Lions at this point are America's team. I mean, everybody and their mom is a Detroit Lions fan coming into this next season, which is why if I talk down on the Lions at all, I get pretty much death threats. I mean, people get upset if you say something negative about the Detroit Lions. But what I have personally done with the Lions this offseason is, while maybe I've been fading some of their other options, such as like Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, and even Jared Goff, I've pretty much just been drafting the running backs, because one thing that nobody can deny is the fact that the Detroit Lions have a young elite offensive line, where we just saw last season Jamal Williams, who's nothing special. I mean, his entire rookie contract in Green Bay looked like just a guy, went out there and led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. So I am overweight on both David Montgomery as well as Jahmyr Gibbs going into this next season. I think both of these guys can be quality options. Now, of course, it depends on the price point of these players. If you're looking right now on regular redraft formats, you have Jahmyr Gibbs as the running back 16. In comparison, in these underdog drafts, Jahmyr Gibbs is going as the running back 12. So you probably prefer him in your regular redraft league, especially if it's full PPR, because Jahmyr Gibbs here, based off what we saw at Alabama, is going to be the passing down running back at the next level. And then if we're going to be looking at the price point of David Montgomery is going as the running back 29 in ESPN drafts. Whereas if you're looking at those best ball drafts on Underdog, David Montgomery is currently going as the running back 24. So it seems like, per usual, the Underdog drafters kind of understand this is an elite Detroit Lions offensive line, and they're pushing these guys way the hell up. On Underdog, I think they're probably appropriately priced. I could see both of them clearly finishing as top 24 running backs. But if you're in your casual redraft format, I think that both these guys present great values. I'm looking at Gibbs in a full PPR format. I'm looking at Montgomery maybe in a half PPR league, non-PPR league. Now, our last team, the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is why Jalen Hurts is my quarterback 1. The Eagles, across the board, every single site that we looked at had the Philadelphia Eagles with the best offensive line in football. What is wild, I mean, this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen, is if you go ahead and if you look at the player props that Underdog has on Jalen Hurts right now, they have him at 10.5 rushing touchdowns. The expectation, double-digit rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts. If we're looking at where these guys are being drafted right now, DeAndre Swift is a running back that is being drafted as the running back 25 in normal redraft formats. Whereas in these Underdog drafts, DeAndre Swift is being drafted as the running back 23. Now, I don't necessarily think the fit with Jalen Hurts makes a lot of sense with DeAndre Swift to put up fantasy points. At the end of the day with Swift, what we've historically seen is we've seen him have no role whatsoever as a rusher. I mean, he's averaged 9 carries per game through the first 3 years of his NFL career, but we've seen a phenomenal receiving down back. He's averaged about 5 targets per game. So you're seeing about 1 target for every 1.9 carries. Now, what you want is you want your quarterback to be stationary. You want a pocket passing option that's not going to run the ball himself, and it will dump the ball off to the running back out of the backfield when the pocket collapses. That's not Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is going to run the ball himself. So I don't love the fit between DeAndre Swift and Jalen Hurts from a fantasy football perspective, but with the Eagles, they may put up more points than any other team in the NFL this next season. If you can get access to some of this offense, whether that's through DeAndre Swift, whether that's through maybe Rashad Penny in deep formats, maybe that's through Jalen Hurts, it's probably a good idea. But I think that's all we have for this video. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope that you enjoyed it. And of course, if you want to get in a draft with us, later today, I'll be drafting on the live stream. No matter when you're watching this, you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy down in the comment section in the description. Sign up with promo code FLOCK. They're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. You get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com. Plus, that's where all those player props are available in damn near every state. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate you, and I really hope I get a draft with you on the live stream later today.